Even with AI, PwC's own reports go out and say that in 2030, we would have created $15 trillion worth of net new economic opportunity. You have to take that leap of faith and make the investments and move for the world to change. You can't be secure and sure.
So if you weren't in consulting, which career would you be in?
somebody-
Professional gamer?
For somebody who's been in consulting for 23 years, you can't possibly imagine.
So what's one business decision that you'd only trust a human to take?
I won't say this publicly, but I will say this.
So as businesses are now trying to integrate with AI and blockchain, now risk consulting is also sort of evolving. So what kind of trends do you think are shaping risk consulting?
There is fundamentally risk in everything that you're doing. How many companies in India today, manufacturing companies, have actually embraced private 5G networks? Massive opportunity, but we haven't taken that bold shift at scale.
So what is your perspective on what skills are going to be key for new professionals who are coming into consulting?
The world is changing really, really fast. In fact, one of the CEOs made that statement saying the world's never been as fast as it is today, and it's possibly the slowest that it'll ever be.
So what would be your piece of advice for potential candidates coming into consulting, wanting to tread the path of leadership?
I think my answer to that question is very simple.
Imagine a world where digital transformation is not about technology. It's about reshaping how industries work. Having witnessed how businesses transform with digital trends, I have always been fascinated to understand what sets digital leaders apart. Welcome to Build with Shreya, where ideas and stories inspire you to build something extraordinary. So today, we are honored to have with us Manpreet Singh Ahuja, who has been the Chief Digital Officer and now the Chief Clients and Alliances Officer at PwC. Being a leader in finance, digital transformation, as well as strategic innovation, he has derived his expertise from a solid foundation in education from Delhi University, ICAI, and programs at Columbia Business School as well as MIT Sloan. With over 2 decades at PwC India, Manpreet has been instrumental in driving digital solutions for strengthening technological capabilities. His experience spans across consulting, risk management, as well as auditing across global markets that positions him at the forefront of digital transformation. Since the next step in the digital transformation journey for any industry right now is how to adopt GenAI based solutions, in this episode, we are going to focus and dive deep into a step-by-step roadmap on how industry leaders can focus on how to approach adoption of GenAI based solutions. So we'll explore practical strategies, real-world use cases, as well as the broader vision of how India is gearing up to embrace AI-based solutions across various industries. So whether you are a business leader, industry expert, tech enthusiast, or somebody who's just curious about the future of AI in India, this conversation is packed with insights that you wouldn't want to miss. So sit right there and let us welcome Manpreet Singh Ahuja to Build with Shreya. So hi Manpreet, welcome to Build with Shreya. We are so elated to have you here.
Absolutely a pleasure, Shreya. It was a joy to meet you at the CII event and a couple of conversations thereafter. Excited to get into details with you here.
Absolutely. So let's get started. So Manpreet, there are always these defining moments, which define our career, especially in the beginning, right? So for you, what were those moments that led you to consulting? And what are the different perspectives around leadership that you had on that journey that led you more towards digital transformation along the way?
Yeah, if I were to put this on a lighter note, my family says you were a nitpicker when you were growing up, and nitpicking just became a habit, and consulting gave you a great opportunity to find the loopholes, find the faults, find the opportunities, and create value. When I started my career, consulting was an aspirational space to be in. It felt like a good dream place. PwC was always a large, great brand. So it was an aspirational place to get in. But once I got in, I kind of realized there was so much to learn, because I remember my first year itself, I would have done some 12 outstation travels, seen some 7-8 different companies, learned around how those different companies and sectors work. So it was really enjoyable for a 22-year-old kid to have experienced 6 different companies in a year's time. What better than that environment? And of course, it was fast-paced. Of course, you had to be in a treadmill, but it just, once you got used to the hang of it, it was addictive, actually. Anything slower would not work well. The second thing, from consulting to, in fact, when I started off this world, I'm actually a chartered accountant. So I started off with the world of finance and risk and audits and process. Those were pieces I kind of worked on. But the more you got into businesses, you realized you weren't solving for financial matters or finance related issues. You were solving for process. You were solving for people. You were solving for technology. And some of the best solutions to fix problems was actually technology. And that's what sort of opened my mind towards technology, the power of technology. And what started off as a layer of differentiation for you individually and as a business became a passion and eventually a career. So then I said, why not embrace technology and be in the space of solving problems with technology?
So, as businesses are now trying to integrate with AI and blockchain, now risk consulting is also sort of evolving. So, it's not anymore just about compliance. It's more about being a strategic functions and aligning to dealing with geopolitical tensions or digital security even. So, what kind of trends do you think are shaping risk consulting? What are the different things that businesses can sort of accommodate for when they're sort of managing these risks around
I
their
think the
businesses?
most fundamental shift that I see in the world of risk when I started to where we are getting to, I mean, the area is obviously evolving and evolving at a fast pace, is that there is fundamentally risk in everything that you're doing. There is, in the world's changing at a very fast pace, whether it's geopolitics, whether it's technology, whether it's, new business models, competition. There are new players that are coming in, sectoral boundaries are getting blurred. No, there's risk in everything. If you were in a mindset where risk was a reactive compliance function, then you're completely not relevant to business at all. I mean, yes, you may be doing something that's compliance, but you're not relevant to the business. So, how do you become proactive? How do you make things more predictive? How do you leverage data, technology to be able to simulate that environment and be able to add value to a customer? Customer, when I say the business, is where you'll have to get to. It's like if you're building a Ferrari, for speed, you have to test for brakes as and when the car is being built or before it actually goes to production. So embedding risk in the design of the organization across all functions is where the next generation value is, which is what gets you resilience. And that's a quantum shift from where we used to be when I started my life and career.
So you attended different conferences last year, the Mobile World Congress as well as the Phoenix CXO Annual Fest, and there were discussions around AI, 5G. What were your biggest takeaways from those conferences, and what do you think is shaping the next segment for AI and 5G?
See, when you think of tech, when you think of AI, when you think of digital transformation, there's two mindsets you could have. You can have a defend strategy that's more palatable because you aren't spending as much and you're defending your core, you're defending your business. And the other is an attack strategy where you could go back and say, let's bring it on. I want to take competition head on. I want to, when everybody is playing chess, I want to play poker. You're changing the game. At Mobile World Congress specifically, you kind of see that attack strategy or attack options come to life, because you may have vividness, you may have fluidness in your mind in terms of should I not, will this yield result or not, will it get me to my desired state or not. But it's a confluence of 1,000+ tech companies that are coming together and bringing you the real picture of what the future of technology is going to be for you. And once you see that, you get the conviction to take the decision and move and propel forward. How many companies in India today, manufacturing companies, have actually embraced private 5G networks? Will it make a difference? Will it create digital twins? Will it actually industrialize and create efficiencies in how manufacturing outputs will get generated in the country? Massive opportunity, but we haven't taken that bold shift at scale. These are things that you begin to start seeing it. So for me, in one short word, that's a very quick 3-day glimpse of an attack strategy coming to life and getting the conviction to make the investments and scale your business for competitive edge.
So PwC is deeply involved in AI-based transformational solutions, and so what are your favorites, so far, especially in Gen AI?
For me, so GenAI itself, I remember the November 22, blew us up. When you have a 100-page report that gets summarized in a quick prompt, I mean, imagine a consultant's life. That's such a breather. That's such a, you can sleep an extra hour that night. But so everything in this journey has been fascinating. The possibilities are great. But what personally blows me away is the fact that the ability to hyper personalize things to a customer, that same product meaning 1,000 things for 1,000 genres, is really where new business models get unlocked. Which again goes back to my last response saying, if you are in the business wanting to play an attack strategy and differentiate and create new revenue streams, create new product profiles, create new genres, that's really where an opportunity gets created with GenAI, which was not possible in the world, prior to that. I mean, let's imagine, if you're in the business of selling tires, and suddenly you change the game of saying, I want to sell tire as a service. Very nice, great, cool. But can you imagine how many customers will you bill for? How will you raise the invoices? How will you collect that? Is that even possible? How much data will you have to manage? AI and associated technologies today make it possible to pivot your business on that. Now, as you pivot your business on that, you're not just creating a competitive differentiation in the market, but you're generating an underlying data that could create a net new revenue opportunity. Tomorrow, you could disrupt the insurance market as well, because that data gives you specific information about driving styles of a particular driver, and your insurance underwriting would be very different. So you started off selling tires and you sort of moving into insurance. That's the world that I really like about GenAI and the possibilities of what it can do from a product, price, personalization, and a business model perspective.
Let's talk about AI and like job displacement as a key issue that has come up. So, what is your perspective on what skills are going to be key for new professionals who are coming into consulting or related jobs where AI would supposedly take the more of the operational work? What are the key skills that will become pivotal?
So before I take the key skills, and I will talk about that, I want to just talk about the job displacement and the whole anxiety around AI and what it will do to an economy like us, and so many people and so much workforce. Look back at life, the last 100 years. Each revolution thought we were challenging the past, and there were quicker, faster, efficient ways of doing things, and the old economy will die. Ground reality, GDP grew,
Absolutely.
economy grew, roles grew, skills changed. Great question. That's the relevant bit. Even with AI, PwC's own reports go out and say that in 2030, we would have created $15 trillion worth of net new economic opportunity. $15 trillion. Now, if that $15 trillion worth of net new economic activity, even if it's done 40%, 50% more efficiently with new ways of working, that's still a lot more economic activity on the table, which means that that's more money available, more workforce required, more employment getting created. I mean, Zomatos of the world came in. What did that do? That created, the rider community never even existed, right? There's so many people who get lifetime unemployment through that. So you will clearly start seeing a lot new economic activity, which isn't even happening right now, that will begin to start happening. So I don't think, in the short run, of course, there could be issues and anxieties, but clearly in the long run, it's going to definitely benefit, a country like ours, an economy like ours, and of course, the global market as well. I think from a skill standpoint, the world is changing really, really fast. In fact, one of the CEOs made that statement saying, the world's never been as fast as it is today, and it's possibly the slowest that it'll ever be. So life's going to change very fast. New technologies will keep coming your way, which means in this, old world, if you were in a business X, all you had to do was run that business more efficiently for the next 20 years. You would have episodical issues and crises that you'll have to deal with. But today, every day is a crisis. There's a geopolitical issue, there's a tariff issue, there's a technology issue. You got to take decisions. Those decisions may not necessarily yield results. Let's look at 6G. We've invested money in 5G. Billions of dollars have been put in. Do you think we've all made return out of that 5G investments? But there's 6G on the table. Are you saying you will wait for that, or will you make an investment in 6G? You have to take that leap of faith and make the investments and move for the world to change. You can't be secure and sure, which means as a CEO, if you're taking 10 decisions, you have to have the humility to realize that 6 out of those 10 could go wrong. But the ability to fail fast, fail cheap is what will make you succeed, will let you innovate. Because we can't give up innovation. We can't wait for an absolute 100% perfect business case before we make a decision. You will not take decisions. We live in a fluid world. Agility, resilience, the ability to think outside the boundaries of rationality, and the ability to fail fast, fail cheap are going to be extremely important.
I think, even when I interact with multiple business owners, I think this is one of the blockers to adoption of AI. People are looking for that, ultimate solution that they would adopt and probably not making the right investments right now. I think companies need to keep aside an investment saying, okay, we're going to try, we're going to be dynamic, we're going to keep adopting the new things that come in our way. It could fail. We might need to adopt new things in the future and be okay with that. And from that, my next question is around calculating ROI. I think that becomes very important for businesses saying, okay, like, with the increasing cost of GPUs, TPUs, and model training, how do you strategically calculate the ROI and long-term investments for a business to make sense when they're adopting new technologies like GenAI or AI or blockchain even?
So I'm going to break this down into two bits. The first bit that you're talking about is the general adoption story of saying, businesses can get very myopic and say, unless you give me the moon, I won't even get started.
Absolutely.
I think my answer to that question is very simple. You and I can argue and disagree between what the future in stores for the next 12 months. Will AI change the world in 12 months or not? You and I can dispute. But will AI make a substantial difference in 5 years' time such that I can't shut my eyes to that opportunity? You and I will completely agree. you can't shut your eyes. We know that trend. We know that mega trend, that this is a big change. Now, if that's a mega trend and that's maybe worst case 4 years, 5 years out, you want to make the journey start now. You can't keep waiting for you to start doing this as a reaction to everybody else having done this in the market. You'll be out of business, because the ability of businesses to scale very fast is very high with technology available today. So the reaction times are much smaller. So if I was a business leader, I'd go back and say, pick up the signals from so much of noise that's happening. If you hear a strong signal that this is the trend that's real, it's signal, it's not noise, then you have to start playing with it, start dabbling with it, start innovating with it. Be okay to fail in that journey, but not wait for gold standard, because that's a signal. You got to move towards it. You got to learn from it. That's what resilience is. That's what agility is. And not many companies sort of do that every day. I mean, if I could just pick up a PwC example, November 22, we committed, our global chairman committed, $1 billion worth of investment in GenAI. It must have been a very bold call. I mean, what was the business case of $1 billion? Did we go back and sign up saying we'll make $6 billion that year or next year? So bold, courageous decision. But because we invested that $1 billion upfront, we had the war chest to be able to dabble and make some strategic investments ahead of time. I can tell you, if we had not had that war chest, it would have taken us 3x amount of money to do what we were able to do with that first billion. So that's the first bit of it. The second bit that you're talking about is the return on investment, right? End of the day, you run a business and you're accountable to investors, stakeholders, board, and you have to deliver the return on investment. So I just can't keep dabbling with it without worrying about return. Ground reality is, first be very clear in terms of what your aspiration and vision is. You want to solve and play, like I said, defense strategy. You might want to optimize cost. You might want to make sure that I can automate things and do things faster and quicker. Versus attack strategy could mean that I want to play with revenues. I want to create net new opportunities. That entire vision requires different might and different ways of calculating ROI. About 90% of the market today is playing the defense strategy. That's basically a cost play. And that cost play has a very simple ROI equation. If there's a certain number of transactions being managed by a certain number of people, and if I'm bringing in an agentic solution to the table that has the might and the scale to be able to deal with the volumes I'm talking about, it's a simple ROI. Something was being done by X number of people, today is being done by the agentic world, and hence cost per transaction has gone down. If it's the defense strategy, which is where 90% of the market is, the ROI calculations are much easier, much simpler, and consultants and technology companies are putting a skin in the game to be able to deliver a return on investment or deliver an outcome, and sort of doing pricing accordingly. However, if you're playing the attack strategy, that's where ROI begins to be a lot more difficult. But you need to have a conviction to saying this is the trend and I need to dabble with it. And once you get to that sweet spot, the ROIs will get built. So that's the journey that people are in.
What are your suggestions around budgeting for it? I think companies never budgeted for this kind of thing, especially if you talk about non-tech businesses, traditional businesses, maybe manufacturing companies, right? So how should they start budgeting for it? What kind of percentages they can look for? Okay, like this is something that we should give into adoption, whether it is in terms of digital transformation or AI or whatever of that sorts.
Tough question. The only thing is a tough question simply because as much as a CIO, CTO, CDO, you would push and convince the leadership to say, we must have a budget for this. And then deep seeks of the world come in and people say, oh my God, your cost should go down by 1/4. So please cut the budgets off. You should actually be doing things cheaper, quicker, faster. Coding today can be done at 1/4 the cost. Why should your budgets go up? So again, like I said, before we even go out to budget, it's an important piece for the leadership to be fully aligned, saying, what do we expect from AI for my business over the 1 to 3 year period? If I'm playing a defense strategy, the examples I'm talking about, saying DeepSeek aa the cost has to go down. You're playing a defense strategy. If that's the game, a lot of leadership will come back and say, please make sure that you carve out some cash flow to dabble with it, but get me a return within 12 to 18 month period. So your budgets will obviously be much smaller. But if you want to go back and get into an attack strategy, you will need bigger bites. So if a typical company has 5 to 6% of their top line sort of going out into tech spends, tech budgets, would you not want at least a couple of percent dabbling with AI, with the conviction that it's going to give me productivity and competitive advantage? Of course, you'll need to factor that. Like I said, all the firms and people who are in the business of taking AI to the market, I'm sure your own business as well, we've all put in money. Like PwC, I said, if we put in $1 billion,
absolutely,
there wouldn't be, there's no science behind it, but you had to create a war chest to be able to get the opportunity moving. The investors are putting in money in this business, because they know that's the mega trend where the world is going to move. But bigger question is, get the leadership group aligned on why AI, what's the purpose of AI, what's the vision that we have. Is it defend? Is it attack? If it's defend, play accordingly. If it's attack, play accordingly. Don't get transactional. Don't take, here is one use case I want to do, please budget X lakhs for it. It won't cut the ice.
Self-use AI tools coming into picture like ChatGPT. Lot of strategic advice people just get there, right? So what do you think about the value proposition of consulting in the future? Like, how do you see that changing, and to stay relevant, how do you think that consulting as an entire industry would transform?
I would be too complacent if I say consulting world's not changing. There's a lot of value that you get today just by prompting on a public platform, public LLM, that you would have erstwhile, maybe 30 years back, 20 years
I
back,
mean, I
sort of
remember we
expected a
met on
consultant.
that event where
Yeah,
we had family businesses, and
Yeah.
you were telling them to use.
It was a complex demerger transaction that's,
And I asked you a question, which was
yeah.
like, this is not the question for this room.
So so you're right, that is an exposure and risk, but I also kind of feel the 15 new trillion dollars that have to be created is going to mean that companies will have to think outside their skin to make the investments to chase that net new opportunity. As they begin to start doing that, it's not doing things better, it's doing new things. If it's doing new things that have not been done before, LLMs can help you, but you will need the human ingenuity to be able to bring in that thinking of saying, this is the space that you could go out and create a disruptive model on. And that's where consulting opportunities will get created. So the game will get a lot more complex for consultants. The problem statements that will come to us will be a lot more complex, because it's not because you've done this job 100 times before and therefore you're doing it the 101st time. Is because you've worked with 100 different companies, you understand the broad context, you have the power of AI with you, and hence you can start reimagining what the future revenue stream for a company will be. And because it's a little bit of a foggy future, the consulting firms will have to put a skin in the game to saying, for that foggy future, me and my tech alliance partners are willing to put a skin in the game to be able to chase that outcome and get you the outcome. And if we do get you the outcome, we'll all bite it together. So that's the world we'll have to get towards, which is going to be a very different business from what we are doing today.
So, for all the non-tech entrepreneurs who are watching our podcast today, what would be your few steps that they should take in order to adopt new technology to make sure they're up their game, or they're sort of ahead of their game?
So if you're
You sort of touched upon it, like
yeah,
with
no,
the
no,
previous
no,
question, but like the
can
concrete
amplify
steps.
it. I can amplify it 50 more times. If you're doing anything in this world today, and if you're in the business today, uh, I mean, two things. I actually think if you're a young entrepreneur starting a new business, you actually have an advantage because you don't have a legacy to deal with. You can go out and be born in the world where LLMs can define how your business gets done. So that's, think of that as a positive. Think of that as steroids that you have access to that legacy did not have access to, or will have to spend a lot more money to change the legacy world. Number one. Number two, because you have that as an advantage, you cannot be thinking of a business that's not AI first. You have to bring in that AI thinking. Now, if you're a technologist, you'll do this for a living. But if you're not a technologist, a lot of people will have that mental block saying, oh, but I'm not the technologist. I want to do something that's non-technology. And that's the biggest myth that you have to solve for. We lived in a world 20, 30, 40 years back where people had to learn technology to make the most out of it. Today, technology is learning what a human needs to get out of it. I mean, imagine, I pick up my phone and I say, this is the song I want to hear. You're just a few months, if not a year away from the phone figuring out this is what your mood seems like, this is what you ought to listen. That's what technology is doing. The technology is understanding human a lot more, and it'll do what you want it to do. So take that inhibition off that you're not a technologist. Technology is available to help you. And fourth, because you want to be at the boundaries of sort of pushing innovation, have a technologist as a co-founder in your business. Very, very critical.
So for every successful AI project, there's so many others which have failed for one reason or the other, right? Whether the infrastructure didn't support, they didn't scale well, they, company invested largely, but they didn't have a right roadmap, right? So what are the different failures you've seen around this area? Which projects failed, and what do you think? What are the main reasons why they do?
I think data is the reason why projects fail. So, when you build a prototype, you're able to show the art of the possible, and that's very exciting. And then when you want to scale that prototype into a production sort of output, let's pick up simple case of a chatbot. It's no brainer. The chatbots do a great conversation. We chat with it as a
course.
consumer all the time. But when you launch a chatbot to a consumer as a company, you need that chatbot to be able to, empathize with the customer in a certain way. Right now, unless you train that chatbot with the underlying data, with the context of your business, you're not going to get good outputs, which means that there will be outliers that will keep coming through that will mess up with your customer. And that's not acceptable. So, to get this fully right, you need to have some underlying data available or a synthetic data available for the models to be trained enough. Now, the problem is this, I mean, this is Gartner data. 4% of corporate India has their data right for AI, which means a lot of that structured, unstructured data needs to be put together. You've got to have the right lakes in place for it to be able to train the models for you to get the end output. And those who are doing use case shopping, this is so cool. Can you do it for me? Here is a quick check. You will not solve it. You have to get that foundation layer sorted, and on top of that, solve for tech patterns, and then exploit that tech pattern for a deeper ROI in the business. But that's a journey. If you're looking at quick 3-month outputs, there is a chance that 3 out of 10 will succeed and the 7 will fail.
So you recently talked about model AI cities, right? So what is your thought around the policymakers and businesses sort of coming together to make sure that model AI cities is not just about technological innovation, but it is sort of inclusive ethically as well? And what are your thoughts around that?
I mean, model ICT is a concept, but what I really think is for a country like ours, 1.5, 1.6, sort of billion people in the country, there is a massive digital divide because, as much as we're saying AI is going to solve for so many things, there are people who don't necessarily, yes, smartphone usage, 800 million. That's still 800 million. There's another 700 who don't have it. So we have to figure out ways of solving for that divide. And if we are able to solve for that divide, imagine the net contribution back in that economy getting activated back to our GDPs is going to be phenomenal. So that's something that we got to do. So a model AI city, in my mind, was a city which will enable that digital divide getting addressed at the core itself, in the design itself. Having said that, as much as it's a very aspirational and an interesting idea, when you do it at scale with the government for a city, you have to think of the underlying data with which this city is trained cannot have a bias, right? If I'm saying 700 million people don't necessarily have a smartphone and their digital footprint is very limited, that means the data that is available to train those models will not necessarily be skewed towards the people who, the guys that I'm trying to solve for. It's an important one that needs to get sorted. If the model is taking some decisions in spirit of efficiency, not having explainability is going to be a problem. I mean, a company can say, "Oh, I goofed up." The government can't say I goofed up. So it's a tough task. It's not an easy one. So getting the responsible AI in the core of that thinking of what government can do for citizens or a city can do for citizens is what is going to be very, very key. With so much of data sort of coming in, privacy matters, security matters, cyber matters are going to be extremely critical. So all of that will have to be thought in the core of that design of that city or a service that the government's kind of thinking through, which is going to be extremely important. Now it's easier said than done to say, put it in the core. What is that design? What should those policies be? What should those guardrails be? How much granular can you get right now? Because a lot of what you want to do, this is concepts and it'll evolve. It'll be iterative. So doing it at a scale of a government's very, very challenging. But the good news is the government and MeTi and there's a lot of proactive thinking and working and consultations that are happening, which hopefully will put us in good stead.
So as you said, the first step is around getting the data right, right? And as a country, we have different forms of data, unstructured, structured, and we need to put it together. So do you think the government is sort of thinking about it on how to go about that and also sort of make sure that that data layer is unbiased? Are they taking steps towards it?
Yeah, I mean, very interesting. So, our honorable minister has already sort of gone out and said that, in about 6 months, we're trying to move fast towards getting India's own native LLM. And that's, I mean, you can't do this without solving for the data layer for the country. And that's such a massive step forward for a country like us because, all other LLMs would largely have a bias of where the digital footprint is high. And we want our LLMs to be more and more native and representative of our country. And if the government were to take a lead and get this sorted, which is where the government seems to be headed, that's a massive boost for businesses, and that's a massive edge on the digital infrastructure that we've already built as a country. I'm sure the world will watch us on this.
So, I mean, when we talk about foundational models, most of them are sort of devised in the Western world and then, DeepSeek sort of came in. But what is your thought around India sort of creating their foundational model? People say it's impossible, but
No,
do you
no,
think
it's
it's possible?
oh,
And if
absolutely.
yes, how?
Absolutely. As I said, it's possible. Honorable Minister spoken about it. It was in the newspaper, some 160, 170 proposals have already reached the government on this. So there's a lot of euphoria, excitement around people saying, yes, it's solvable. Yes, it's doable. And so much of development that's happening in the open source world today makes it even quicker and faster. The, there is no lack of data that the country has. I mean, we have 6 billion people traveling on trains in the country. I mean, if you look at IRCTC, there's crazy amount of data that's available there. There's crazy amount of data available with all the flights that are happening in the country. There's a crazy amount of data that's happening in e-commerce and banking. So it's a matter of creating that safe environment, just as what government did with UPI, to be able to get this moving. So I'm very, very bullish. It will happen, and it's not just a distant future. It'll happen like 6, 8, 10 months from now, really.
Awesome. Fingers crossed
Fingers
for
crossed.
that. Yeah. And one of the concerns, again, good thing that this sort of is coming, but other concerns around foundational models being, only in the Western world, and with the Western world sort of looking inwards with the tariffs and everything sort of going out there. The question was, okay, today we are spending so much energy creating the right wrappers and localized LLMs for organization and all of that. But going forward, what if they become protectionist about it? Like, what if we lose access?
Yeah.
Then what happens to all that effort, right? Because we're sort of fully dependent on that. So, what are your thoughts around that?
So I think two things. 2023 was all about LLMs. 2024, you would kind of debate saying this LLM versus that LLM. After a certain point, you reach a layer of sophistication where there's very little to choose. Because every possible data that was available has been scraped and used into the models. So really, from this point onwards, the next piece is going to be your data. Like I'm saying, our own native model will create the next layer of edge. That's one thing. Second thing is open source has developed and progressed very, very significantly. I mean, today there are open source models that can get you some 40,000 agents freely.
Right.
The agentic world has just
Of course,
started, and that's happening in the open source world already.
Yes.
So courtesy open source, these guardrails, between geopolitical stress and tensions that we live in won't exist. And especially for a country like India, which has got such a big developer ecosystem and a strong open source world and the mindset to embrace open source, I think we are in a safe position. Plus, the government having started the journey of sort of building that sort of enabling or pushing or encouraging the build of local models is a piece that keeps me in. I mean, at least I don't lose my sleep. We're in safe bucket there. I mean, people like Sarvam have already been in this journey, building up their sort of foundational models here locally. So we are in good shape.
As you talked about data-driven strategies, sort of becoming the core of every business nowadays, and that's how they are sort of increasing their profitability as well. Like TMT sector, the profitability goes up to 50-60% these days, whereas other traditional product
SaaS
companies.
companies go up to 90%, right? So I mean, so clearly,
Yeah, absolutely. What are your thoughts in today's time, especially in 2025, as we are in March, April, right? So, what are your thoughts around Indian companies harnessing data-driven insights and driving the maximum profitability?
it's a massive opportunity, and that's the most lowest hanging opportunity right now. If you pick up any industry, any company, you're dealing with the world of customers, you're dealing with operations, and you're dealing with enterprise functions. If you're living in the world of customer, whether you're selling or you're marketing or you're servicing, data is your edge. Data is what gets you the competitive way of differentiating how you reach out to a customer, or how do you target the market, targeted marketing, or how your service experience is delightful. You can't do this without data. So I mean, it's a no-brainer. The more data you bring, the more personalized it is. Like, let me give you an example. You and I both fly to Bombay. We both go to an airport. How does your journey to the flight and my journey to the flight get differentiated? Is it differentiated today? It's the same right now. But the fact that you have a certain, if that journey can get personalized, there's definitely more money that the ecosystem can make from you because they know you better. And that's, you can't do this unless there's data. Now, are we saying there isn't enough data about Shreya, or there isn't enough data that the airports have, or there isn't enough data around your flying patterns or the shoppings you do? Everything is there, but somebody's got to make money out of it, and build platforms around it. So that's the world of customers. Operations, pick up supply chain, complexity, so much of complexity. Today, whether it's tariff or whether it's another disruption or a geopolitical issue, I have millions of contracts. I have millions of parts that are being built with different lead times. If I want to re-simulate that supply chain to say, what if I don't take it from Vietnam and I take it from this part of the world? The lead time will change, the prices will change, the taxes will change, the complexity will change. I want to re-simulate it to take a decision. How can you do this? You can't do this unless you have this entire life cycle digitized, unless you have almost a supply chain digital twin, where you can simulate and get answers. Now, if you don't have that, your ability to take a decision, building a competitive advantage gets completely impaired. So if you have those hard contracts without a CLM that digitizes everything, you can't even get the journey started. I mean, forget about AI. So that's the second layer of advantage. Pick up enterprise functions, CFO's office, CHRO's office, general counsel's office. What's the single biggest value of that office back to business? They want to be business partners. They want to bring insights to business. They want to help you take better decisions, quicker decisions. How does that happen? Basis data. Basis data that allows you to dig into the past and predict the future. So you as a business leader can take smarter decisions. If you don't have that data integrated, you'll have average decisions. Bad decisions lead to bad data leads to bad decisions. So I just think that it's a no-brainer that the single biggest oil today is data. And the only way to get better productivity, better efficiency, better competitive advantage, and newer revenue streams won't happen unless you're playing with data. And therefore, data cannot be one person's job. It can't be a CIO's job, CTO's job, CDO's job, data leader's job. Data has to be the core of your business. That is your business, actually. And that's a mindset shift that is happening, but needs to happen a lot more. It happened a lot more in TMT because it's a tech business, but needs to happen in manufacturing, and needs to happen in healthcare, and needs to happen in insurance and regulated sectors. I mean, that's where the boundaries need to be pushed.
Since you talked about different departments, different arenas of a business, what are some solutions that really came to your notice department wise, that you felt that are really good if they adopt it in today's time, especially when it comes to Gen AI?
Yeah, I'll pick up two. I mean, the first one that has come in really handy, and we're using it across the 30,000 people in PwC India, is the ability to talk to data. I mean, I call it the AI for BI. There's so much of data that we, as a consultant, you're constantly exploring data, building hypotheses, testing it, simulating it, and making recommendations. That's 40% of a lot of work that we'll end up doing. Now, in that, gathering data, formatting data, getting it into a certain shape, making correlations takes a lot of time. If I had the ability of getting 150 data sources getting plugged into an AI front end and allowed me to talk to that front end, for what I talk, it gets converted into a Python query. That Python query gets converted into a result. That result gets visualized in the way I want it to be visualized. Imagine, what would have taken me days and days and days gets done in like a few seconds. And the power of an intelligent AI layer actually not only responding to my questions, but actually prompting me questions, saying, if you're a CFO and if this is the data, I'd be worried about this. That's the power. So that's really, really powerful. Whether you're sales ops, whether you're HR ops, whether you're finance, whether you're business, everybody needs to use that. The other thing that kind of blew me away, and it was the early stages. We'd done a partnership with a company called Harvey. It was almost like a December 22 journey. It's an OpenAI invested company, of course. They're a large company now. We were one of the first ones to sort of, enterprise customer, one of the largest customers. We did an exclusive alliance with them as well. And at that stage, December 22, the ability to get intelligence out of a contract or intelligence around a regulation, or be able to scan the whole world and get me thematics on what are the potential emerging compliances that I should be worried about. That horizon scan was something that was really, really powerful, because, that's all you need as a, at least if in the world of, if you're a general counsel, that's a very strong, these contracts have such a strong piece of information, both on customer side and vendor side. And that intelligence powered by the layer of compliance is very, very powerful. And we saw that product evolve over the period. So, PwC got it in. We have a large tax business, $10 billion business globally, trained the models, tested it back, used it on the field. Very, very powerful experience, and saw it very firsthand.
And if I ask you personally, which tool has come in handy in your day-to-day life? Gen AI tool.
Uh, I mean, honestly, for me, a big part of the life is also work. Chat PWC,
Okay.
which is just the first layer of secure LLM in the PWC environment, is something that we're all addicted to. I mean, in our own firm, we have, I don't know, over a few million prompts that have already happened. The adoption rates are above 75%. And it's the good news is it's safe and secure, which means I can get confidential pieces of information, commercial pieces of information put onto that platform, get the AI intelligence, and not have to worry about that sort of going out into any public domain. And that's something we very addictively use all the time.
The question around prompt engineering as a whole, how to get the right set of prompt engineers in your team. What is your recommendation? Because, the way you're prompting the model, it can also define the model,
Yeah.
right? So sometimes the way you prompt it makes it not work well. That's where it becomes important how you hire prompt engineers. They're able to prompt the model the right way, and what would be the best practices around prompt engineering, because I think that's something unexplored right now and we're still struggling with it.
Holy grail. The only thing is that, first is the acknowledgement that prompt engineering is a critical skill in your AI arsenal. That's important. You can be smart, you can understand what to get out of AI, but you still need a prompt engineer because a lot of puzzles can be solved with a smart prompt engineer in the team. The second thing is that, if you're wanting to make sure that across the 30,000 people that you have in the firm, everybody goes through a layer of prompt engineering or prompt qualification, it's always going to be a struggle. The way I think the best practice I think to solve it is start building prompt libraries. Start figuring out the user persona, figuring out their roles, and around those roles, figure what are the prompts that should get created, which are optimized, that stay in the library. So if I, as a citizen, I'm asking a question, that question with the AI intelligence layer goes back and maps itself to the intelligent question in the library so that that prompt gets used. And over a period, if this is a continuous motion that you're working on, your libraries will keep getting sharper and sharper. Your compute costs will get more and more optimized, and people will get better results. And in the process, people will over a period learn to improve themselves on their prompting itself. That's the quickest way of solving it. Build that central capability, work with the business, build prompt libraries, and get that scaled in the firm or a company.
While we are at hiring, what are some of the qualities that are core to you, specifically when you're hiring for a high stakes project? So let's say top three qualities that you say, okay, this is a person I would like in my team.
Yeah, so I'm going to respond to this more as a person than as a company.
Of course.
I really am a big believer of fail fast, fail cheap. So for somebody who's gone through failures, I ran a startup and I wasn't able to be successful, and then I moved on to a job. That's like a huge positive for me, because you should have gone through challenges, adversaries to have kind of come back into the game. Now, I'm not saying if you get a smart person in front of me who hasn't failed a startup doesn't mean the guy is not good, but I mean, things that people like to hide are the things that actually make me appreciate them a lot more, because they've shown resilience, they've shown courage, they've shown entrepreneurial capabilities to be able to come back. So that's a very, very important skill set. The other thing is fundamentally being able to think out of the box. Like I was saying, think beyond the boundaries of rationality is extremely critical, because, as I said, the world's very, very complex and you want people to think differently. I don't want somebody who will respond to my instructions. I want somebody to come back and challenge me and say, hey, you know what, you're thinking legacy, I've got a better way of doing it. So, and last but not the least, the owner's mindset is extremely critical, because if the person in that role is driven to figure out that I am the owner of the company, the thinking process will be very, very different. You're the owner of the company, right? So I'm sure you think that way, and I want every single employee of the company to think that way. So those are three things that I think will be very critical for me.
So, what would be your piece of advice, for potential candidates coming into consulting, wanting to tread the path of leadership? What would be your 2 cents?
Hang in there. Perseverance is extremely critical. And we're all looking at instant gratification. A lot of us go back and say, you know what, I've got a raw job, so I need to get promoted, I need to get better salary, I need to do this, I need to win this. I think you have to, like for AI said, look at the trend. 5 years forward, this is going to be a big disruptor, so I must keep investing in this journey. Similarly, life in consulting, like I said, it gives you great exposure, it gives you a great platform, it gets you to learn different leadership styles, learn different operating models, look at three companies of the same sector to say, okay, what's the difference between this company and this style? What's the difference between an American way of working versus a Japanese way of working versus a British way of working? That's great exposure. And if you play long for that exposure, you've hit the gold spot any which ways, simply because not only will you do well in this setup, because of that experience, you'll get more and more vital and important, but for anything else, even if you were to set up your own business or leave that and do another job, that experience is going to stay with you. So don't get disillusioned with short-term gratification as the core agenda. Have a deeper purpose and stay aligned with it. Is perseverance, hang in there, stay in there, and have that big dream that keeps you moving towards it.
So if you weren't in consulting, which career would you be in? Stand-up comedian,
For
professional
somebody,
gamer?
for somebody who's been in consulting for 23 years, you can't possibly imagine. I was good at sports, actually. I had a
Really?
400-meter sport, a national record on my name. I was good at sports, so I would have done something in sports, or maybe a food critique, because that's very close to being in a consulting world. Presentation is important, content is important, and visualization and all of that. So one of those two, sports or food critique.
So if you were stranded on a deserted island, which three work-related things would you take with you?
Work related, Wi-Fi is super critical. Please God, give me that Wi-Fi when I'm deserted. So that's super critical. Unlimited battery is super critical. Whatever device, gadget I need to be able to manage. And actually those two are super critical. And of course, a device where I can play around and get things moving. Those are three things.
So tell me, how many PowerPoint slides have you seen in your life? And which one was your favorite?
Unlimited. It's death by PowerPoint in the world that we've grown in. Hopefully, we're getting to a world where PowerPoints will die or whatever. Sorry, will evolve will transform. Yeah, but lots of them. I think the joke that goes around in consulting is slide 89th of 120th will say, less is more. So it's over years you kind of realize it takes a lot more effort to package a lot more and lot less. We do bulky stuff. So less is more, but not on slide 89. That should be slide 1.
What hack do you swear by to make your day 10x more efficient? And no, coffee doesn't count.
Actually, my morning yoga is super critical.
Okay.
That gets me moving. Whether I've slept enough or not, yoga gets me moving. Having smart people around you is the second life hack, not a day hack. They're quicker, faster, and empower them. I constantly go out and say your next lines need to be smarter than you are. Empower them. That makes your life really efficient. And the last hack I would tend to think is just embrace AI in everything you do. Makes a big difference.
If you had to sum up the future of digital strategy in one word, what would it be?
It's evolving. It's fluid. It has to keep changing. So you can't be in the business and say, oh, I've taken a decision now for the next 5 years. I'm sorted. I've spent my millions. Now I'm sorted. It's fluid. It's evolving, and you have to keep dabbling with it and be open to dabble with it. Fluid.
So what's one business decision that you'd only trust a human to take and not an AI recommendation?
I wouldn't say this publicly, but I will say this. Hiring, as much as we've got all the prototypes and solutions available to solving it, I think it's the human connection. I won't hire a person just based on an AI decision. AI can help filter things, but hiring my team is a very intense activity that I would do personally, or be not dependent on AI for that.
So what's one old school technology or gadget that you really miss? Floppy disks, CDs, BlackBerry phones, MS Messenger?
Blackberry. I remember carrying that hefty BlackBerry and those, it was, in fact, when the smartphones came, I resisted that a lot because I just said, there's so much of mails that we were always on. And the joy of clicks, I struggled actually to get to a smartphone, and then eventually one fine day I got hooked on completely. But BlackBerry really is my favorite gadget.
If consultants had superpowers, I
remember my engagement photos. This bulky gadget hanging onto my belt.
That's one good way to remember it.
Yeah.
So if consultants had superpowers, which would be yours?
If consultants had superpowers, it already is there, AI. There's just so much of research, reading, summarization, putting a point of view together. It used to suck a lot of your time and bandwidth. We're not short of ideas, we're short of time. And I think it's already here and now. It's the AI layer that allows you to go through thousands of pages to be able to convert that to the context of a customer or a situation is the power that is already there. I mean,
Okay.
honestly, don't expect anything more. I mean, it's already made our lives a lot easier.
What's one book that you would like to recommend to our audience?
So, I mean, one book that had an impact on me when I was growing up was Never Eat Alone. And, growing up in a consulting world and sort of gradually moving into a world where relationships and selling and ideation was super critical, building relationships and breaking the boundaries. I mean, I was an introverted person who would not want to go out and mingle with the world. That book actually just opened my horizons in terms of how to build relationships and how to push the boundaries and how to network organically, naturally, and make it more enjoyable. So that was personally a big one for me. Yeah, read it out.
So now we have come to the end of our podcast. So as we are experiencing the Ghibli trend or the action figurine trend, sit tight till the next trend takes flight, and let us look forward to more GenAI based adoption in different industries and different solutions of tomorrow. See you then.